coaches. Welcome to another episode of Coaching Youth Hoops. I am your host, Coach Bill Flitter. Today we are joined by Shea Ballish from Curv Health. Shay, welcome to the show.
Bill, thanks for having me. Very excited to jump in here and get into things.
Awesome. So if you've been a listener to the podcast, you listened to last week, Shay was on. We were just talking about sports performance in general. Today we're going to dive into mental performance. And we'll talk a little bit about what Shay's doing to help athletes with mental performance. But before we get started, let's put a definition on mental performance, mental skills. What does that actually mean?
That is a great place to start, Bill. And there's two ways to tackle that question. Top down, everything is mental, right? Our brains control our motor abilities, our coordination, our skill set. They control our emotions. And so really what people practically refer to when they're talking about mental performance is those skills, tactical tools of the mind that can actually be changed, right? And just like the physical body, there's a number of skills that allow us to navigate the world. If you're a human, you sure as hell better be able to walk and run and jump and throw and, navigate the real world. There's a number of these mental tools as well, right?
Hmm.
Cultivating the right emotional response to the right action to achieve your goals, being able to problem solve, being able to regulate particular emotions, being able to navigate a social crowd, all of those mental tools that allow you to influence the world and achieve your goals in the real world is really, that's what we're really referring to. Right. So I really try to draw an analogy with the physical body as many of your coaches will obviously know. Um, but there's many mental skills and tools. And so we talk about mental performance. It's nice to distill it down into mental skills. So that's kind of the top down is trying to make it quite practical.
So can you
Bottom up,
give me an example of what that a mental skill that should be trained, right? We train, the basketball court, right? We train you to dribble, right? So what's a mental skill that a young athlete needs to master?
right. So let's just use probably the most common mental skill is confidence.
Hmm.
Um, Confidence is modifiable to a large extent. And the confidence an athlete brings onto the court, and all your coaches will know this, right? The confidence an athlete brings onto the court, the right level of confidence can drastically improve performance. Now you can have not, you can lack confidence, but you can also
Yep.
be too confident, where you become irrational and live in fantasy world and end up trying to be the hero on your team and actually disrupting the performance of the team. And so, how do you actually build and modify confidence in your athletes to perform the best, while also staying grounded in the real world and not drifting off into fantasy land? And it's fun to talk about these things in kind of a general sense. Coaches love to talk about these things. They love to point out examples of Michael Jordan's confidence or other types of athletes' confidence. But knowing how to train it and actually improve it in your athletes is still a developing science. And we've made a lot of progress, especially in the last decade. And hopefully what we'll get to in this podcast a little bit is how do we actually get there and how can coaches kind of update their own toolkit to improve some of these mental skills to
Yeah.
ultimately allow the kids to improve their mental performance.
Well, and I think you're right on. I mean, I always say as I don't coach basketball, I coach confidence. And if I can create a confident athlete, they will perform and they'll perform under pressure. And I spend a lot of time various ways. Again, you're the expert. I just do this by trial and error and figure out what works. But even just praise, right? Even on the small things, right? And you can catch a player, we have this whole thing we call next play, right? everybody's going to make a mistake on the court, including me on the sidelines, right? I'm going to make the wrong call or not make a call at all, a timeout or a play. Like the other day, we're getting killed. We have the best press break, and this team we played, it was playing really aggressive man-to-man defense. Okay? And I'm watching the game unfold. I'm watching my players struggle, and I completely forgot a piece of this press break that we practiced for very particular moment. So I made a mistake and I apologized after. And all of the that and my team fed back to me what I say to them. So then that's a success and had to do with coach, that's okay. We'll get him next time. Hey, next play, coach, that type of mentality. We've built our red dot framework around boosting confidence. So let's dive into maybe let's take that and run with it. Uh, how practically as a coach do I build confidence?
The first, I think, the first place to stand as a coach, if you're taking this journey of building your athlete's confidence, is to recognize that, as anyone would know, there are no shortcuts. Your kids, despite them being kids, despite them being young athletes, are smart. And if you try to pull the wool over their eyes by just telling them to be confident, or to try to,
Right.
reason
Yeah.
with them in some irrational way, they're going to look at you like you're a goofball, right? They're vigilant
Right.
to an extent. So you have to be real with them. I think the real way to frame building confidence is how do you set up the experiences of your athletes that will just lead to more confidence among your athletes rather than talking to them. So it's a coaching
Mm.
philosophy that's more ingrained and embodied rather than a lecture hall style approach, right? And I don't know about you, Bill, but one of my and I for the audience, I did play relatively competitive high level basketball, at least here in Canada, and coached at the university level as assistant coach for a couple of years. The best coaches in some ways talk the least. They recognize
Mm.
that the best way to change behavior is just to get the reps on the court and letting the instincts that are in the minds of these athletes get the reps in. And words are often, talk is cheap in some ways. And so the framing to start with is how do you set up your practices, your coaching, your expectations, your incentives, the culture to foster one where confidence is optimized, not necessarily maximized. We don't want everyone, taking fadeaway three-pointers and throwing behind the back passes all the time.
Right. Yeah.
But where it's optimized, and that's the first thing. We're not, as a sports psychologist comes in and they're working with high level NBA players, and we have, a sports psychologist on our company's roster that actually works with a number of NBA, NFL. They're not taking necessarily. There is a lot of talk-based approach, and they work with their athlete and they talk about things, but it's more around setting the expectation of how to do the work to build confidence. So to give an example of what I'm kind of ranting about here, when I've coached, I use the analogy of going into a test in your school, your high school or in university where you feel extremely confident. Well, that's because you deserve to feel confident because you've prepared. And so
Hmm.
showing the athletes that if they can take a serious approach to preparation, what they get is this deep level of confidence. And you can actually kind of pull back the curtain on Michael Jordan's confidence, right? And understand that this is an individual, and you could throw Kobe Bryant in the same conversation. Their work ethic was unparalleled, and so they had a insane amount of confidence that in their mind was so rock solid because it was rational. It was they had outworked, they had deserved to have success. They believed in their success so deeply because they deserved it. And this ties back in to this very first point I made, where your kids are smart. And so how can you convince them and give them the opportunities to earn an extreme level of confidence and to remind them that if they feel like they deserve it, if they put the work in, that they should feel entitled to have confidence because they deserve it.
Interesting.
right?
So let's talk about the negatives though, is what chips away at that confidence and talk about let's explore the little stuff. We know the big stuff, screaming, at somebody, cutting them down. Uh, you they missed a shot and you're on them because they missed a shot, right? But what are those little things that maybe we don't realize that are actually hurting athletes' confidence? And you have to remember, an adult level of confidence versus and what's going to hurt an adult versus what's going to hurt a child when, especially teenagers, right? They're developing and they're going through these huge changes and they're under so much pressure of outside the court stuff. So talk about, dive into that a little bit. Maybe some
Yeah.
subtle things that we're doing that, gosh, we should stop doing, right?
Well, this is something we talked about right on our last podcast a little bit, that the age that these young athletes are growing up in is extremely weird. It's mismatched with what humans are used to. And these
Good point.
athletes are growing
Yes.
up in a social media age where one wrong word, or they're growing up in a cancel culture age where one wrong word, one failure can tarnish their reputation for the rest of their lives. In some ways, it actually does, unfortunately. Now, luckily, that's starting to change a little bit, and that intense kind of cancel culture is going away. So some of these athletes are coming in with expectations that everything they're doing is the final performance rather than the first practice.
Mm,
And
mm-hmm.
and how coaches can use their words, their coaching, rather than, setting up the practice correctly for them to feel like they've earned their confidence. Of course, they need to do that, facilitate the parameters, revise the environment. But when they go beyond that to actually use their words and talk to the athletes, it's to really remind them that caring what other people about what other people think, that if you care deeply about what other people think, with every performance, whether it be good or bad, you will stunt your growth. And so it's only those people that are
Mm,
willing to go in and fail and fail and fail and persevere through that because they recognize they're on a path to greatness. They're not there yet and they have to fail along that path. That will help insulate them from this feeling that they're at the final performance rather than the first practice.
mm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And we did talk about that, which is we don't let our kids fail. And we need to let them fail and let them know that's okay and that's part of the journey.
Yeah, I would say, I would interrupt and say it is a necessary part.
Hmm.
And you rob your children. You should actively set them up for failure. Uh, I think. And an example that came up in some of my research, Bill, I know we talked about it on the last podcast, but my
Yeah.
background, I did a PhD in kind of health and sports psychology. And youth sports psychology was my master's thesis, actually focused on that. And I coached at the university level in basketball for a little while. Um, setting up setting up that right uh, environment for success, and in particular, articulating how failure is a necessary part of that is so important, right? And we used to have this thing we call like the failure vaccination hypothesis, which is what sport actually does at a very high level for character development, is
Interesting.
allow young humans, young athletes, to navigate meaningful failures and meaningful successes in a social environment that they will take then into the real world and help them be successful. And so, for example, you do see athletes outperform non-athletes in some areas. For example, young, women in particular benefit the most from this. So young female competitive athletes when they grow up, are far more overrepresented in executive boardrooms than non-female, than
Mm,
female non-athletes, right?
right.
And so
It's
you really want
interesting.
to
Yeah.
set them up for failure. Anyway, sorry, I'm ranting here.
No, it's an interesting, because as I was thinking through some of these issues around confidence and building confidence, one of the things that I preach a lot about a couple of things really is, we talked about the next play mentality, right? We actually, again, if you can go back and listen to the podcast about the red dot, but, we physically put a red dot on our hand between our index finger and our thumb, and it's a pressure point. And and I always say this, when you make a mistake, it's not if you're going to make a mistake in a game, just just press that and say next play. Or you'll hear me from the sidelines yelling, next play. Like, it's okay. All right, we'll get through this. Um, it's a game and we're learning. And the next thing that we do, which you just um, alluded to, which is we do comfort zone challenges. So I'll take my team outside the court and we'll go and do a challenge, which might be challenging strangers to karaoke at our local shopping center, right? So each we pair them up and then they go out and do these challenges and both pair, and I do it strategically. I pair them up one person who I know will have zero problem approaching someone and with a person who is like a little bit timid and they go around and they'll approach a stranger. It's all adult supervised as well. There's two people with an adult, and they follow them around. The adult is standing back. They can't interfere, but just make sure they're safe. And they have to do, the one thing we do is karaoke. The other thing is rock, paper, scissors, right? But the whole idea is, my goal in that is saying, okay, I have a fear of singing, fear of talking to other people, but I can do it, right? That's what I want them at the end. And then that little bit, right? And the more we do these, the more we challenge them in on the court as well, that confidence just keeps on escalating, right? It doesn't go from necessarily from 0 to 100. It goes from zero maybe to 10 to 15 to 50, right? And it's building blocks over time. And those are the types of things that, in my opinion, just stack up. And, I've seen that transform young players' lives for the better.
That is so interesting. I love this is a personal opinion. I'm not speaking for the research here, but I
Yeah,
love that you're doing these comfort zone challenges and pairing them up appropriately and helping them go out there and experience and get over some of these like emotional obstacles that many people never get over because they're too scared of failure, right? Getting
right,
over that, pushing their
right.
limit is so powerful. It
Yeah,
reminds me of, that kind of famous movie Fight Club, which is,
right.
this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
a little, extreme, but part of the Fight Club for the members of the Fight Club was to go out and initiate a fight with some stranger on the street and intentionally lose the fight. And
yeah.
there was some like weird method to that madness around like the psychology of that, of intentionally losing a fight, that you start to probably build a incredible amount of confidence around navigating potential violence and staying away from it. I don't know. So maybe not the best analogy, but I really respect what you're doing. Question for you, Bill. Do
Yeah.
you ever use like age scaffolding in terms of allowing your younger players to like compete or play with older players, like age mixing? Is that something that you've used in your coaching philosophy or you've seen work or not work well?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we definitely do. So a lot of times what we'll do, we just did what we we did a shoe drive, and one of the things that the players had to do, and I matched an older player with a younger player. And when I say older, eighth grader with a third or fourth grader. They then had to go around our community and ask shop owners to hang a poster to promote the shoe drive. So I had them all do the work of doing that. Again, going back to the comfort zone challenge concept, and my eighth graders, thankfully, I would say across the board, they're extremely confident young ladies. They didn't start that way, right? That happened over time. And I wanted to show the younger, right, team of, hey, they can aspire to that. And some of the younger players are already like, oh my gosh, you have more confidence in your little finger than, right? But yeah, so yeah, we definitely do that. We definitely, is that kind of what you were thinking? Is that what you were
Yeah,
a concept of? Yeah.
well, I think the interest, like I'm a huge proponent of age mixing for performance improvement
Hmm.
and um, and doing it in a way where you get to play with better players and worse players. And usually you can influence that by just older athletes or younger athletes. And so having
Yeah.
some of your better players play with older athletes that are far better than them and vice versa, that where they can go and learn the skills, they can almost steal or mimic the
See it.
insights and the
Yeah.
tactics, then go and
Yep.
apply them in a context where maybe they are the best athlete. That is a really powerful way of scaffolding learning and accelerating learning. I think the age segregation that occurs not just in sports but in education is a necessity for efficiency in our society, but also robs athletes. And when you think about the kind of many thousands of generations that have been have preceded us, our ancestors, the youth
Yeah.
environment of our deep ancestors was full of age mixing. It wasn't age segregated, and I think there actually is some social
Good
learning
point.
instincts that we have that are being robbed a little bit in the current environment. And so it's something when I've worked with sport clubs at a high level, as an executive
Yeah.
level, not just as a singular coach, I've always tried to facilitate age mixing in many ways.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, one of the my club is called Level Up, and it's Level Up for multiple reasons. Uh, and we take that name to heart, meaning we do play. I try to mix. We'll go. We might go. Third grade and fourth grade together on a team and play at the higher level, or a lot of times. How we do age mixing is that our older girls come in towards the end of the younger girls' practice, and then we do a scrimmage. We mix the team, so it's some of the older girls and the younger girls together on one team. And I do that for the exact same reason you just outlined. I think that is really important for them to mimic, see where see the vision of where they can be and the younger people, right, and where they're going. We also do camps in where I have the younger girls coaching, I mean, the older girls coaching the younger girls, and I stay out of the way and just let them
Yeah.
do their thing. And that has been a huge success because, again, a fourth grade girl is going to relate better to an eighth grade girl, right? Than a
And I think
40-year-old,
that
50-year-old man, so or woman.
oh, very much so, very much so. And I think to go back to the mental skills side, the mental performance side, the changes in expectations on these young girls or these young athletes when they age mix is really interesting. All of a sudden, they go from being the best player on their team that is expected to be the best player on their team to being the worst one, perhaps a lower quality or worse, and they
Yeah.
expect it to be low. And so all of a sudden, that high level athlete that you have actually has zero expectations, none of the pressure, and has the ability to try all these new things and to maybe learn a little bit about being a role player or to try to advance and actually be the best player among the older athletes because they're an underdog and they have nothing to
Yeah.
lose and they're playing as if they've burned all their boats, to so to speak. And the same thing with the younger athletes. But
Well, I was going to add to that, and it's a really good point because one of the things, and this is can be a question to you, and I think you've already addressed this, but I want to hammer it home. I have a sixth grade girl who played on the sixth grade team last season. Okay, through a set of circumstances, I was going to put her back with her teammates, and then I realized like it's just not the right mix. Okay. Physically, like just she's great player, probably above where she should be at her age. And so my next consideration was, well, what do I do with her? And so I moved her up to this team I have is mainly a bunch of group of eighth graders. So it's two grades above. Okay, so physically different as well. I thought, okay, we'll challenge her. Um, she's moving from best on her team to, probably the worst because she's, physically different. But the biggest consideration is, can she handle it mentally? Will she be okay playing with older girls? Will she be embarrassed when she makes a mistake or she feels like she's letting those older girls down? What So that's my next question of like, okay, I look at those things and take that in consideration before moving a player. And if, okay, physically can she hang? Check. Mentally can she hang? Check. Let me check in with the parents, right? So I do go through all of these, right, interactions of like, okay, let's see. Let's see. If not, we'll just move her. It's okay. She not only kick their butt the first few practices, because I know what my eighth graders are thinking. Oh, she's a sixth grader, right? She's a sixth grader, right? We got this. She out hustled them, outworked them, and that made the older girls like, oh crap, we got to step it up. Like we're gonna show her that she's a sixth grader. You know what I mean? And so that
Absolutely.
elevated them, and that was awesome to see. But the mental aspect is so key in that, I think. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No,
Mental
absolutely.
consideration. Yeah.
That I would say most of more than 50% of the benefit of age mixing is actually an improvement in the mental skills and the performance psychology of the athlete rather than just necessarily some type of skill acquisition. And I think to your point, it is very much a net positive on all of the athletes going through that. The older athletes feel that they're now being challenged because they're expected to be better than the younger athlete, and they have to step up and know
Hmm.
how to actually control and perform when there's a meaningful amount of pressure, when there is a giant killer underneath their feet, or so to speak, an underdog that's coming up with some success, and vice versa. The other thing that you often see, and maybe we don't need to talk about age mixing the whole time, but another mental skill that's really interesting is just leadership qualities, where
Yeah.
you'll see very quickly, and this learning curve is much steeper than other ones, where it'll happen much quicker, where a young athlete will go play with older players and they'll quickly realize, oh my God, these girls or these guys aren't worrying about appearing weird. They're really communicative on the court and they're over communicating and they're talking and they're chanting. And, you know, the best athletes are actually the ones that are trying to be the cheerleaders on the team and, lead the team in high fives. Like, why can't I do that? I can bring that culture of kind of being overly communicative and the types of like the obvious aspects of a good culture and bring that to my lower levels, or I can be an instigator for a positive culture. And you see that quite quickly because it gives these these younger athletes that play with the older athletes a permit to go out there and do that when they've seen some of their athletes that they idolize or they look up to perform
Yeah.
these things. So it transmits culture. Like cultural transmission, it sounds like such an abstract academic term, but it matters in athletics. It matters
That's a
so,
really
so
good
much.
point. Yeah, no, that's right on. Again, we've talked about talked about all these little things. I do the comfort zone challenges. We have the red dot. Um, we have the idea of the next play. All of these little confidence boosters for the individual. Also, the one I don't want to overlook, because I'm sure you read the study as well, is the number of high fives given on a particular team and how that translates to the number of wins. Now, you probably have a different approach to that, or maybe, um, but that even that alone is a great confidence booster peer to peer.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, some of those studies are a little confounded because, who high fives the most? Well, the winning teams do because they're winning, right?
Because they're
But,
winning. Yeah, right. It's a good
but
point. Right. Yeah.
controlling for that,
Yeah.
in these statistical analyses, some
Yeah.
of it really does come out. And ultimately, where and I've found, and there's some studies looking at high performing coaches, they have a beautiful balance of seriousness and playfulness, where
Mm, very
even
key. We just
someone
did a
in
podcast on that exact thing, not to interrupt, but it's coming. I think it airs as you and I are recording this today on that
amazing.
idea, that mix of joy and being serious. You
Yes.
know?
Yeah. And there's a balance. It often ends up reflecting that, the best coaches have extremely stubborn goals, but they have incredibly flexible methods of how to achieve those goals. It
Hmm.
depends on the context, on the team, on the athletes, on the
Really
time.
good key point right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Well, let's
um,
talk about goal setting for young athletes. Um, we hear that thrown out. We hear that, it's timely too, right? Beginning at the end of one year, starting of another year, right? We set our goals for the year. Uh, I'm a coach, talking to a young athlete, and right, it's like, oh, you should set goals, right? Going back to
yeah,
what we talked about before, the lecture. But I think it's important.
absolutely, absolutely, it's important. It's one of the most um, misunderstood and abused, or
Yes.
misunderstood and kind of maligned mental skills, where if you do goal setting correctly, it is one of the top differentiators of the top performers versus those that are not. And let me try to paint a bit of a picture here and give you an example. Um, Everyone, when a boat leaves the harbor, if it doesn't have a destination, no wind is favorable, right? You
Right.
have to know the direction you're going. You have to have a goal. That's the easy part. Most people do. And young athletes, those goals may be a little ambiguous because they're just like, I want to be cool, or I want to be the best, or I want to, I want
Yeah.
people to look at me more, and all of those various things. But when you really get into the nitty-gritty, the interesting parts of goal setting and how it differentiates the highest performers, it is a beautiful tapestry of emotional regulation that enables behavior change. So when you look at how the top performers in basketball talk about their own goals, we can use the example of Kobe Bryant, right? Kobe Bryant, to his credit, and he did identify as someone who is the hardest worker, and is
Right.
better than others because he works hard and earns it, which goes back to the confidence thing. But when he would talk about goal setting, he would identify his goals and then start to create an identity and a commitment to himself that he doesn't negotiate with himself.
Hmm.
Kobe Bryant said he doesn't negotiate with himself. So what happens if you set a goal and you don't negotiate with yourself? That means you deliver on that goal no matter what. You go out there and actually achieve it. Most of the time, people set goals. They're idealistic dreams. They're not actually goals. They're dreams, and they have so many different clauses and conditions surrounded them. Well, if I don't get enough sleep, I can't achieve it. Well, if I don't do this, I can't achieve it. And if I'm feeling tired, I'm not going to achieve that goal. And there's so many ways that are, the human minds have angels and demons. The demons can creep in and create justifications for and excuses for not achieving goals. And if you simply say, I'm not going to negotiate with myself, this is my goal, and hell or high water, I'm going to achieve it to the best of my ability. You see a tremendous amount of difference in the behavior of those athletes versus those that say they're goal setting and they're a little bored with their goal setting. And ultimately, there's just all kinds of uh, holes that these self-defeating justifications and excuses can creep into.
Well, let's dive into that though, because I think it's really important. The,
Sorry.
one of the things I always hear, well, I hear a lot. A player will set a number of points scored as a goal in a game. Parents will incentivize the player to score X number of points in the game. It's a team sport, right? I don't think that's the best goal, right? So in a team sports situation, as an individual setting a goal, I have to set goals that have the team in mind, question mark right there, and goals that I can have control over,
Yeah.
right? I and you know. the goal is to win the game, right? Well, that's always the goal, right? Or the and I'm trying to use my words rightly based on the definition that you just laid out. You know, I don't have 100% control over winning that game. So how as a individual athlete on a team set goals and what
Yeah.
a concrete example of a goal a high performing athlete, young athlete would set.
That's a great question, Bill. And we get this a lot is okay, well, if goal setting is this like abused thing and kids kind of roll their eyes when you talk about it, how do you actually go about facilitating the right goals in the right context and the right time? The number one thing that young athletes do care about because they're humans is how their peers look at them. And all these athletes ultimately, their emotional goals is, to be the best and be valued by their peers, to be a helpful friend and a productive contributor. And most of the time they make errors because all the kids want to be the superstars and they all want to score all the points because that is the kind of short-term little simple obvious thing for them is to be the one playing.
It's easy to measure, right? How many
It's
points
easy to
did you
measure.
score, right? Yeah, I scored 10.
Exactly.
Okay, great. It's a right.
So
Yeah.
so one of the things we do with coaches is we'll actually allow kind of a collective goal setting, like individual goal setting, but in a collective context. So you can bring your athletes in and you could go around and you can start to share each athlete start to share their individual goals to contributing to a win on the team. And they can get and receive feedback from their peers on those goals. And so an athlete that may be thinking, well, no, I want to score the most points, when all their peers are saying like you can help us beat this team and maybe win the championship by like actually getting more rebounds and assists.
How about stops on defense?
And hey,
Right?
exactly, even further, stops on defense. And you can start to glamorize
Yeah.
those previously non or like ugly or the stuff that sits in the dark corners of the basketball gyms. You can glamorize the dirty work, the hard work. And you can say that is, it's easy to make your goals to score the most points. We know that, Sarah or Trevor or John, your top goal scorers, they're going to be our goal scorers because they're the best shooters or they're the best slashers or these reasons. And we're going to continue to rely on them. But we need to win as a team. We need people to do the dirty work. We need people not just to play the piano, but to carry the piano. And when you glamorize, and especially my point is when the athletes' peers, their teammates, glamorize or highlight the value of the dirty work, then you start to get this beautiful um, partitioning or branching of status striving within a team. You get all the kids trying to go after different areas of status or looking good, which these are adolescent kids they care about. And so if you branch out
Yeah.
that goal setting, especially when it comes from their peers, that's the big point. Coaches fail to recognize often that athletes, they respect them in some ways, but no humans really like dictators, and a coach is a dictator. I mean, in some form, coaches don't want to be, and they want to be this more democratic facilitator, but it's easy for an athlete to look at their parent or their coach and go, okay, you want me to do this? Sure. Like that's you telling me. But when their peers are highlighting to them, it emotionally registers much more intensely.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This this brings up a point then. So metrics as it leads to confidence. So everything can be tracked now, right? Through AI, Huddle, right, at the high school level is a big tool that a lot of programs use to track stats, right? And the first thing that the an athlete will do after a game is look at their highlight reel on Huddle, right, and see all of their, guess what, points or scoring opportunities, right? Something that leads to the little ball in the big bucket versus the three defensive stops they did. Okay, so do stats, well, I'll ask it plainly. Are they a help or a hindrance to building confidence? And how can a coach use numbers and data to help with the mental side of the game and not tear someone down because now we have all the metrics and the metrics say your thumbs up or your thumbs down, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe in between someplace.
That's such a great question. It's something we deal with at with Curve, our company,
Yeah.
at this company that we're building, which can bring for the first time sports science tools and practitioners to the high school level for your coaches, right? Very easy to sign up if I have to plug it here. There's your listeners have already seen links. Please, coaches, sign up. It's free. We'll give you a quick introduction. It's hardly any work on your side at all. You simply sign up and we send you an ability to evaluate your athletes and get a report back on all the things we're talking about here today.
Let me give that URL real quick too. Go to coachingyouthhoops.com/health. And it is an amazing program that Shay and his team are building. And we'll stay tuned here. We'll come back to it and dive into it a little bit more.
So to answer your question, right? Does the analytics of the intangibles, of the mental skills, of the confidence, of various things, does that help or hinder an athlete? Of course, it depends. We believe the way we do it, it's tremendously
Hmm.
helpful, mainly because humans do respond to feedback. That's
Hmm.
why we're coaching, right? And
Yeah.
for a lot of these intangibles, the feedback cycles are so few and far between that it's hard to even know if you feel like you're improving or not, to even know. And so when we start to try to measure some of these intangibles with our platform, with a little bit of self-report, with working with our sports psychologists, and we provide kind of a analytic around the mental skills, the mental attributes of your athletes, we can set them up in a way where these athletes can go in and start to recognize that these intangible aspects are actually now tangible, and they can start to take more ownership in improving it themselves. So the same way they can easily see how many points they've scored, we want to make it easily kind of understood or tangible for them to understand
Hmm.
how they're bringing in these mental skills. And so it's a little bit more top of mind than their awareness. Now, we don't design our platform to be addictive. Kids don't, come back every single hour of the day to look at it, but the feedback cycles are far more relevant and motivating than not having them at all. And we
Yeah.
see that once we introduce these concepts and we give athletes this understanding, they take far more ownership. I'll give you an example. Even a lot of your coaches, I bet, and adults in general, have recognized that managing their sleep and getting proper deep sleep is so fundamental to their health. There's been a kind of a revolution in sleep health in the world.
Yep.
And measuring a little bit of it, understanding it, making it top of mind has allowed a lot of people just to prioritize it and actually improve it. You have to be able to change something. It's very helpful to be able to measure something, right? And
Yeah, absolutely.
that's simply our approach. Now, there's all kinds of ways that you can struggle to measure these things, and a lot of it is subjective, but ultimately it's far better than nothing. And the goal is education. The goal is empower the athletes to take control of their mental skills the same way they're taking control and improving their physical skills.
Let's talk about that, taking control of my mental skills. So, uh, I'm at the free throw line. I I make these two free throws. We just won the state championship. Okay, so I'm at the line. I got the first one. But so what do I do as an athlete sitting at the line? Pressure's on. I can either tie this game or I can win it for my team. Or if I miss both of them, right? So,
The psychology of performing under pressure, of clutch moments, is really interesting. And I can speak to like the published peer-reviewed evidence on some of this
mhm.
stuff and try to distill it down to make it practical for the listeners here. One is you want a way to allow the instincts that you've built to, hit that free throw that you've shot tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of times to occur. Don't backseat drive on your instincts, right? Let them roll. And the pressure, how pressure situations facilitate bad performances, um, is it turns the reasoning part of your mind, that internal dialogue, into a backseat driver that kind of turns your instincts off the side of the road. And there's ways of actually ensuring that your mind, the narrative, the dialogue internally doesn't do that by distracting it. There's actually some studies that counting backwards from 100 while performing under high pressure situations, people do way better than if they don't do anything at all.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
it's it's really not
Can I
intuitive.
count down from
I
10
don't.
as I'm sitting on the free throw line?
Yeah, that
I'd
might be a
love
better
to.
way to do it.
All
But I
right,
actually
start counting down, kids. 199. Right, might take a
I
little too
don't
long.
recommend athletes actually do that. It's really just a piece of data to say that's what's happening. So when you actually tell kids that, they get it. They're like, "Oh yeah, like thinking is not always good, and like sometimes I should just go up there and the Nike symbol, I should just do it. Go up there, just do it. Don't think about it. Yeah, it's a high pressure situation, but like, listen, don't get in your head about it. Just go and do it. You've done it a lot." The other form is relying on what you believe to be true, which is you have practiced this a lot, and then you should trust that you deserve to do well because you have practiced. And it puts your confidence on such a solid foundation because it is true. It becomes a true belief that you will
Yeah.
make it because you deserve to make it. And so to not rob yourself of the confidence if you've put in the work. And then it goes back to, being able to put in the work and creating a culture that values hard work, that champions hard work, that allows the athletes to identify as hard workers, to almost tattoo that on their forehead because it helps them perform in scenarios and gives them the confidence because they believe they earned it. And in many cases, they have. So
Well,
those are the two.
and sorry to interrupt. But I think you said something I want to bring to the surface. I hear this also is uh, if a coach has a culture that the players don't fear failure, they're going to perform better under pressure. If they're not afraid of making a mistake or, hey, maybe it's not a state championship game with all, but it's just a regular, regular Friday night game and you miss those free throws, like, okay, coach isn't going to bench you for a week, right? Because you missed the shots. And, coaches do that. And that does not help your athletes and their confidence. I want to bring up a story related. It popped into my head as you were talking, which preparation. So I've taught my players how to shoot a free throw properly. And I don't mean the mechanics of the free throw, how to prepare for the free throw. They have to calm their heart down, right? Because they've just been moving and right, and they get fouled, and now they're in a very quiet situation. All eyes are focused on them. So you got to bring your heart rate down. So I teach them breathing techniques, and we didn't even bring that up. That just in confidence and the mental performance of just the breath work that you could do as a coach. But come to line, you breathe, you get into a routine. My go-to routine has always been a deep breath, pound with the ball, stare, shoot, right? And so I said, I don't care what, like you said before, the goal is to put the little ball in the big hoop. I don't care how you get there, but here are some techniques to help. So here's a game, and I'm so happy that I've built a culture where my players feel confident in coaching me. And we were the girl was shooting a free throw. She was one of my older girls, been through my program, told her 100 times prior to this or more, breathe, do your routine. Well, pressure situation, what do? I say, breathe, right?
Yes.
Right? After the game, she comes up to me, she says, Coach, don't ever say that to me again. I'm like, Okay, why?" All right, diving into it. And she says, You've said it. It actually makes me more nervous because I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, okay. Got it. Like that was really good feedback because she has been there 100 times. She has trained 100 times. She doesn't need to be necessarily reminded anymore, right?
That's
She's on the
beautiful.
line
Yeah.
and focused, right? So,
That's a beautiful example. I find that really interesting. Right. And I think coaches, when you look at all the errors that coaches end up making and you aggregate them up, most of the time they're errors of commission, not omission, which is the coach tried to coach too much, not enough.
yeah,
Right.
that's right.
They end up
Exactly.
saying too
Yeah.
many things.
Yes.
Uh,
Guilty.
they end up saying too many. Yeah. Hey, and look, as a former academic and now a CEO of a technology company, and again bringing sports science to the high school level for coaches, I am guilty of that as well. The one thing I found, and this is more of a personal anecdote, I'm not speaking from the evidence or the literature, but
Yeah.
I always love to try to create a culture that if there was smart mistakes to make or smart like failures that should occur, I always try to champion them. So for example, I coached a certain style of aggressively slashing and pursuing the paint, for example.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And I really tried to push my athletes to say, you know, if you have the right skill set and the right bulldog attitude, you will be able to get high percentage shots in the paint or you'll be able to get wide open threes. And that's what we're going for. And so when our athletes that I coached would get offensive fouls, and obviously no one wants too many offensive fouls, but I would expect that we would get offensive fouls. And if I had a game at a halftime where we had no offensive fouls, I'd be able to
Mm,
highlight
that's a good
what
point. Right.
what are we doing? We don't even have any offensive fouls. That means we're not even trying to get in there.
Yeah.
We're not even pushing the edge. We're not pushing our limits to go slash the paint and get high percentage shots. No one's got an offensive foul. And I would use that to kind of flip the athlete's mind to think about from a high level how they should be orchestrating their behavior.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, no, that's perfect. And you mentioned CEO of a tech company. Let's dive into that, and we'll kind of wrap up with that. So, we're doing a series of interviews with Shay. We want to educate all our coaches on, sports science because I think it's a huge um, edge that they can gain. Something that is, to date has been out of reach for most high school coaches, most, top performing athletes at the high school level. Um, Tools have been expensive, knowledge, resources, etc. But what Curve is doing is you're making it accessible for high schools and high school coaches. So what is Curve, uh, and how does a coach who's listening right now get involved with Curve?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So, the one thing I try to highlight is everyone knows about sports science. And sports science really hasn't touched the high school level yet. It's always been a game of elite level, like high level pro sports, sometimes now NCAA, but sports science hasn't been accessible for competitive high school programs and teams and coaches. And so really what Curve is set out to do is solve that. And so what Curve is a digital sports science platform that coaches can use very easily, very simply to introduce their athletes. And these athletes are often, this is the first time they're getting introduced to some of these sports science tools to really elevate themselves, and the coaches can use it to better coach their athletes. A coach may not have the resources to hire or bring in a sports psychologist or to even vet them. Say maybe a sport nutritionist, maybe a sports scientist or someone to help prevent injuries. And so what we do with our platform is give coaches those tools. So what Curve Health is a digital platform. It's mobile apps for your athletes and it's reports and tools on a website for your coaches. All the coaches have to do is sign up. You've already talked about where the link is. They just simply sign up, share their email. We're going to give them a way to go out and onboard their athletes. Their athletes will simply go through a simple evaluation process, a couple forms, some cool computer vision tools, and then we send this detailed report back to the coaches so they can start to understand how their athletes maybe are doing on in terms of their mental skills, in terms of their nutritional habits, in terms of their sleep habits, in terms of their injuries and injury risk. And the coaches can be better informed about some of these things. in particular, the mental skills, which we were talking about today. Imagine if coaches started to recognize that a lot of their athletes are worried or complaining about their anxiety during large
Mm,
important
hmm.
games, or maybe they're all struggling to take a leadership role, or they're struggling with shame and guilt around letting their teams down. So these coaches can better facilitate how they coach and the situations they put their athletes in to become the best athletes possible, right? So again, the problem we solve for your members, the people listening here, is that a sports science platform has always been 50 or $100,000 for the pro level teams, and it's never been available or cost effective for high school athletes and coaches. And so what we've done is we've used some really interesting AI tools, some software to democratize these sports science tools to bring them to the high school level and allow coaches to level up their whole program so they can introduce their athletes to sports science. Free for the coaches, and it's even free for the athletes with our partnership with you, Bill, where the athletes will have it free for the rest of the season. And if those parents want to enroll their child going forward in that sports science program, they absolutely can for a simple $30 a month. So, it's quite cost effective, it's quite powerful. We really believe in it. Previously, myself, I did a PhD in sport and health psychology. I was, a research fellow at the University of Toronto before I left to really build out this software platform as we recognized this whole AI kind of paradigm shift was occurring, and that AI is going to allow far more resources and far more tools to be in everyone's hands rather than just kind of a select few, pampered or coddled elite level rich
Right.
athletes, right?
Well, and I think the important part of the platform that I really enjoy is, yes, that you get some free tools and you get access, but you get access to real sports psychologists, real nutritionists, like real people who live and breathe this every day and can help your athletes overcome some of these issues. So it's not just letting tech do the work, right? It does a lot of the heavy lifting, but you can get access to professionals. Uh, so I think that's you combine the
Absolutely.
best of both worlds right there.
Absolutely. We have coaches come on and go, oh my goodness, this is for me as a coach. I'm so focused on the operations of my team, booking tournaments, doing these various things. And now I have this amazing arsenal and team of sports psychologists, nutritionists, and the software to level up my athletes one click away. What a great tool. I don't got to spend any
Yeah.
time. I get to build this. And as I go forward, all of my teams I coach, the programs I coach are going to be elevated and top notch because I have this new tool. So really, that's what Curve Health is. If you're a coach in the modern age, you can now very easily bring in and adopt sports science practices e- for free and extremely easily. And that's something that we should be offering these athletes. Sport is about the kids. At the end of the day, it's about building young men and women into, really healthy and happy contributors to society. And why not give them the tool set to manage their health and performance now that we can do it?
Yeah, and tech is coming to basketball. Right? We've talked about it in the show before, and this is just another great example of tech coming to sports, and we're putting such a huge emphasis on sports, which is putting pressure on our kids. And here is help, right? And Curve is offering that. If you go take it, if you coaches go to coachingyouthhoops.com/health to get your team signed up for free. And Shay, we really appreciate you bringing that to our community and offering that as an opportunity. Again, it's an edge that coaches can have in addition to, you know, offense and defensive schemes. Here now they have the mental edge, the physical edge, in addition to all that. So, Shay, any last words?
Bill, I'm really gracious to be on. I love talking the psychology of sports. It's what I spent most of my life studying and trying to apply. In particular, I love basketball as a former basketball athlete, and I'm just really appreciative of you bringing me on. This is super fun. It was flowing back and forth. Anytime you want to chat about any of these things, let me know. as a selfish leader of this company, I'll say any coaches that are interested, reach out. You can sign up on our website or just email me. We have our emails all over our website. Email me. We'll jump on a one-on-one call. I can explain it further if you like. We really hold the coach's hand so they get a really an understanding. So if you're a little on the fence, just reach out. We'll jump on a one-on-one call and we'll help you understand if it's a good fit for you.
And those aren't just words from Shay. He actually really means that because I've seen that in practice. So we appreciate you trying to make our community better and globally the whole sports community better for the kids and the athletes. We will have Shay back on a few more times to share his wisdom with us. So stay tuned for that. Shay, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Bill.